Are you tired of playing small and ready to step confidently into your greatness and share your unique brilliance with the world? Well, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Sabine, and I've dedicated nearly 2 decades to empowering individuals and leaders as they confidently navigate the twists and turns of life and career transitions. If you're seeking direction, connection, or just a little push to play bigger, consider this podcast your VIP pass to a community that genuinely understands your journey. Join me every week for candid conversations and practical guidance designed to help you navigate the challenges of life and business, foster a growth mindset, and cultivate meaningful connections. It's time to embrace your inherent power, define your unique purpose, and prosper in every aspect of your life. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. If this is not your first time and you're a longtime listener, welcome back. I'm so grateful to have you here this week. And I am so grateful to have our guest that we will be chatting with on the series around the paradigms of power or shifting the paradigms of power, Kendra Puryear. So Kendra is a passionate believer in the potential of humanity. She is committed to leaving this world better than she found it through her work as a nonprofit fundraising and marketing professional. She has spent nearly 2 decades in this space. Welcome to the show, Kendra.
Thank you, Sabine. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we were talking a little in the green room, but I would love for you to share, some of the pivotal moments in your career and milestones as you see them that have been the catalyst for you as you've navigated your career journey.
I think it started so early for me. I always wanted to make a difference. I was never afraid to use my voice and advocate for others and really wanted to have that be my professional calling. I thought that I knew what that looked like early on. I thought I wanted to become a lawyer. I wanted to be a politician. I wanted to be able to, change the laws and change the systems. I graduated with a degree in political science and was trying to decide which direction to take exactly. At that point, I'd gotten really interested in foreign affairs. And I was working at a hotel, learning all about hospitality and customer service. And I ran into a group from CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. Advocacy is in their name, of course. And I thought, well, I could go volunteer. And I went there and I realized volunteering was actually a bigger commitment than working there. So I decided maybe I'll just get a job here while I figure this out. I started working there and really never looked back. I realized over time that my real calling was just to use my voice, to advocate for others. And that shifted over time to really be amplifying the voices of others because nobody is voiceless. Their voice is just not listened to by our current systems and by the current powers that be. And so over time, my North Star has really shifted to just amplifying the voices of folks who are really impacted by systems of power that are unfair or structured in a way that just weren't intended for everyone.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So, we were talking about this and I shared with you that I've been asking all of the guests this. I am curious as you hear the words power, authority, and influence, how do you define those three and what have been your experiences with each one of them?
I think I'll start with authority as someone who may have been seen as someone who had a problem with authority growing up. I think that one of the first lessons I learned in therapy was that we really only have authority over ourselves and perhaps small children in our care. Although 2-year-olds would probably beg to differ. So I think really authority, the sooner we realize that, the more powerful we can be. I think so many of us walk into positions of power wanting to exert authority over folks. And I think it's really moving from power over to power with. And I think another lesson I've learned along the way when it comes to influence is that we really have to communicate strategically to influence people. And we cannot influence others if we don't believe in ourselves or trust ourselves. And so again, I go back to therapy, that deep work of trusting your gut, trusting that you've checked all the boxes, that you know the facts, that you've built the skill sets to guide people forward, is really important before you even try to influence someone. I follow an Instagram account called Inquisitive Human, and something that her posts every day challenge me to think differently about relating to other human beings. And one of her posts said, you cannot educate another person without their consent. And consent is an ongoing thing. It's just so powerful to think about the fact that we actually need to connect with people and relate with people before we can ever begin to influence them, guide them, lead them, bring them along with us. And I think that, really leads us to what power is all about. It's really about partnership. And in my line of work, it's really about collective impact. And that's not one person doing one thing. It's one person's ability to build a movement around something, to call attention to something and bring everyone together to make change. And I think, we're in a space where we get to redefine what power looks like. One of the things that I don't think we talk enough about is that there's a lot of fear that comes with being in a position of power. Something that really surprised me as I stepped into a role that has chief in the title. I think I expected that when I got here, that I would feel less afraid. I would feel more free. I would feel more respected and able to speak my truth more boldly. And I actually found for myself, it was the opposite. I was much more bold as a young professional who, didn't have a lot to lose, honestly. And I've really been reflecting on a song, I think it's by Janis Joplin, "Freedom's just a word for nothing left to lose." We think that the more money we have, the more power we have, the more influence we have, we're going to feel more free. But you're on a stage, you're in front of people, you're responsible for people's feelings and emotions and futures in a lot of cases. And that's actually very scary. And it takes a lot of courage to speak your truth there, just as it does for someone who has less perceived power. There's always somebody that is more powerful than you. So there's always a risk in speaking up. And I think that's just something that we don't talk a lot about. And I think as women in power, especially coming alongside each other and walking each other through that so that we don't get to this place and feel paralyzed or stop speaking our truth because of that fear. And really knowing that it is up to us to continue to redefine power and professionalism and all of those things that have been defined in a way that excluded us and many others for so long. I think back to particularly challenging time during a professional transition of mine, where I felt very misunderstood. I feel like I wasn't influencing people in the way that I'd hoped to. I found myself not able to bring people along with me. And two of my female mentors, who are a little ahead of me on this journey, said the same thing to me in different ways. One said, don't frame yourself, others will frame you. And the other said, it sounds like you've really lost control of your narrative. And so I sat with myself and thought, gosh, how am I showing up to this space? Why is this not working? And I realized, I was trying to fit in. And I believe wholeheartedly in what Brene Brown says about fitting in, that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. And I think so many of us, we have been trying to fit into what we think power looks like, what we think people want from us. So I was only showing people the parts of myself that I thought they wanted to see and trying to, code switch for each person. And of course, that's going to come off as inauthentic, maybe even feel manipulative for some, even though that certainly wasn't my intention. And so I had a moment where I had to say, okay, it's time to actually show up as me, as Kendra, and kind of let the chips fall where they may. And shine my light out there with people who I didn't really think wanted to see that light, or whatever color I had to to show them. I was pleasantly surprised that they did want to see it. It was something that I was able to really turn around by just being more of who I was.
Something that you said in the beginning was really, and it plays to that whole shifting shifting the paradigm of what we believe power to be. And so what I have noticed in myself, within my clients, and just society in general, and I know I'm generalizing here, but it's almost like when we've seen power demonstrated in a way that is opposed to our own personal beliefs or our way of being or what we think is, right or good, or you name it, it's easy to reject it, and or it's easy to criticize it. And whenever we're rejecting or whenever we're criticizing something, we are saying that's not me. And while in that moment, we're not explicitly saying, or we're not explicitly deciding that we don't want to be in positions of power, or that we don't want to be in positions of leadership or positions of influence, that's exactly what's happening, because our subconscious mind is registering, oh, that right there is bad. Let's stay away from it. And that's how we have a situation or a society in which people start, men and women, but a lot women, start to abdicate their leadership, start to abdicate their power unknowingly, unwillingly, and unconsciously. And so I love that you brought that up, because I think I am sensing, and I have been sensing since the pandemic, that one, there is a shift in which the invitation or the portal, whatever you want to call it, has been created for more women to step up and re-own what was already theirs. And it's a matter of how do we do it in a way without having to feel like we have to show up the way Bob, Jim, and John show up, but we can still show up as powerful at equal levels of power, right? Balancing out with our male counterparts. And so I love that you brought that up, because I'm a big believer that it's not about one or the other. It's how do we let them be them, because their power is powerful, but also how do we show up as us, because our power is powerful.
Yeah. One of the things that I have found really effective is to come alongside the men who are in power, whether it's a boss or a colleague, and offer my perspective, my more feminine perspective, and offer that as help, offer that as support. I see that you want to get this done. Can I share with you a perspective you might be missing? And I think when people see you as somebody, I'm not trying to say your way is wrong. I think you said that really well. Like, your way is not my way, but that doesn't mean that we both can't find a better way together. Right. And I think when you come at it, you're not fighting it. I think that is a more masculine way of coming about something. Like, I'm going to take this over and I'm going to occupy it and I'm going to make it mine and do it my way. I think there's a little bit of both that needs to be happening. Like you said, the men in these roles have a power of their own. They reach a certain audience. I mean, this portal, I love that. This portal and this invitation has been open to us. But it's not like a magic portal. It's like, I guess it's like a regular portal. So there's still a lot of work to be done and a lot of roads to be paved and a lot of redefining that needs to be done. But what I have found is once these men see that, oh, wait, actually her perspective kind of helped me here. They start seeking your perspective, you start seeking theirs, and you become partners. That's when I think men become our allies. I think that can be a really powerful thing when you're in a very male-dominated space. One of the things that I think I have found most disheartening and maybe difficult to navigate is that a lot of women who've come before us, I don't want to say this wrong, and I think I might have written a note here. So from the book Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser, she says, many of the first women to walk through the doors of power will play by the old rules. And I think that's also where we start to kind of criticize women as like the queen bee, or gosh, women are terrible with each other. And we start to buy into these tropes about well, female leaders are worse than male leaders. And I'm nervous to have a female boss as a woman. I think what we're seeing there is women playing by the rules of men, and it's not natural. It's not authentic, and it doesn't work for us. We have to create our own roadmap, redefine things like professionalism that have been keeping us and marginalized groups out of places of power, because professionalism has been predominantly centered around white heterosexual men and what looks and feels and sounds professional to them. And I don't have all the answers to that, but those are the things I'm questioning. Like, wait, where have I bought into this idea that this is what it looks like, sounds like to be a professional? And where am I as a female leader, like buying into that and hiring that way or supervising that way and continuing to exclude people who don't look like me? Because I look as I'm like the next closest thing to a white male leader. And I have to acknowledge that and acknowledge that I have some biases there around what professionalism looks like and sounds like, because I have been able to fit into it easier than maybe some other groups would fit into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, more nuggets here. More nuggets here. So, I want to go back to the C-suite piece that you mentioned earlier on. I think a lot of us want to be in that position, right? But because so few of us have been there and can actually speak to, well, yeah, I faced those things too. This is how I overcame them. We automatically, and sometimes again, it's a projection of fear. We'll say, well, I don't want to be in front of the firing squad. I don't want to be disliked. I don't want to be that person that they talk about. And again, that is an unconscious way of us relinquishing our power. So I'm curious for you, what practices do you have in place to help you in maintaining your own personal power, or reminding yourself when you're in those situations and you're bringing up something that is not going to be well received? How do you not allow that external response, if you will, to affect who you believe you are?
Well, I am not somebody who is fueled by the criticism of others. And so you hear a lot of people like, I'm going to prove them wrong. And that was my motivation. Like, I'm not motivated that way at all. Like, I'm like, oh my God, everyone hates me. And, I can really spiral if I don't have practices in my life to really center myself and ground myself in my own intuition and trusting myself. And I think for me, it's really about community, the community I keep around me. So making sure that I spend time with people who know me as a whole person, right? Who don't know me as my title, my role, my vocation, to remind me that I'm more than that. But also spending time with people who know me as a professional, especially other female leaders who I know are experiencing the same thing. I am fueled by fighting for others. So when I hear someone else say, oh yeah, I just had that same experience, I almost kind of fuel that energy, like I'm certainly not going to back down from this fight for everyone else who I'm fighting for. Right. And that's a hard thing. You don't want to think that you represent all women or, folks who might identify the way you identify. But, I think for me, it's, making sure that when I'm standing on a stage that I know where the friendly faces are sitting. When I'm in a boardroom, that I know that I put someone right across from me who's going to be nodding and encouraging. I like keep that community around me, that, that personal board who are not just yes men and women, but people who challenge me and who encourage me and who I believe when they say no, trust yourself, like that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. And so I have another question for you in terms of how we can continue to pay it forward for the next generation. Obviously we've done a lot of plowing. If we were looking to pay it forward, what are some of the things that for the women who are in leadership roles now, whether that is in corporate, whether that is in the community, or whether that is in their own business, what can they start to do or think about in terms of preparing the next generation of young women and young girls so that they can have that confidence, they have that knowledge, they have that understanding, and they're not still in that cycle of survival.
I think, what got us here won't get us there is true of this moment in time. And it really is time to sit down. And I think you and I were talking about this before we started recording, but you mentioned like these systems that were built are actually already starting to crumble a little. And so what's required is not necessarily like the taking our hammer to the glass ceiling anymore, or just trying to climb endlessly to the top of that ladder by ourselves. It's really actually rebuilding, redefining, like asking the right questions. What I'm seeing is a lot of the younger generation, like they have the self-trust, like they do believe they deserve these seats. And it's us who might be holding them back by believing in these, archaic ideas of what professionalism is. They're showing up with tattoos or different hairstyles or different ways of dressing or speaking. And we are taking that internalized stuff, right, that we bought into, right? Like I had to dress a certain way. And I mean, I have curly hair. You don't see me wearing my hair curly, that kind of stuff, right? That we just have to let them come in. I think they're going to teach us a lot about what it means to actually show up and not be so worried about what everyone thinks. This people are like, they don't want to work, is what I hear a lot. Like they don't want to work, or they don't want to work in these conditions. Like they don't want to work in this system. They are not willing to do this. And so I think we can be that bridge between, you've still got some people in power who don't really think this way. We can be that bridge to help translate some of what they're saying away from, they don't want to work, to maybe we need to create a different workplace to get the right people here. Maybe we need to lead differently. You brought up empathy earlier. Just creating the conditions that they can actually grow in, and using the trust that we've earned. We've made it through that door that the women before us opened up. And I think sitting down and helping draw that roadmap and helping create that environment where people can grow is really what I feel called to do, and asking the right questions and just building those blueprints. I think we're going to start to build, but I think they're going to finish it, and build the system that they want to work in. But they need the access, and they need to be able to navigate what the situation we're currently in. So I think being translators is probably a huge part of our job right now.
I love that. I hadn't even considered it as translators. I was bridge is the word that I was thinking of, but I love the fact that we are in many ways translating. And so something that you said, I want to bring it back to, again, for those of you who are listening, to start to think about this whole notion of shifting the power paradigms. And you look at just the workforce, right? You have Gen Z, they're about 5%. Of the workforce today. And we're starting to see about 50% of them electing not to go into traditional work environments. And when you look at the structure that we've all been following, right, up until Gen Z, it's really been, if you go back, the 5-day work week, right? It was relevant. There was a time that was relevant, right? And what was the type of work that they were doing when things first started? And it's just like, until we get to a place as a society when we start questioning why we're doing things and making it okay to make that shift. I did a presentation on growth mindset, and I shared the story that I've heard in multiple different ways. But, this man is watching his wife cut a piece of roast, right? And she cuts the end off the roast. And he was just like, honey, why do you do that? And she was like, well, I don't know, because my mom did it that way. He was like, interesting. Okay, let's call up, mom, why do you do this way? Oh, I don't know, because, my mother did it this way. And then they call up grandma, and grandma is like, well, back in the day, the refrigerators were a lot much smaller. And so we needed to cut it so that the meat would fit in there. And here we are 3 generations later, we're still doing the same thing with no understanding why it started. And so I use that as an example as, think about all of the things that we're shoulding or have been should on, right? Of like what we should be doing and how we should be showing up and what this should look like. And ask ourselves, is that true? Is that true for today? And, do we agree with it? And where can we start to make changes for ourselves and our own businesses and our own careers? But also, how do we create space for the next generation to be curious, to ask the questions why, without getting defensive? How do we? I love tradition. Don't get me wrong. But I think that there are just some traditions that need to be challenged, some traditions that we have a room to create new ones. So thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. Before I close out and have you share how people can get in touch with you, I have 3 quick questions for our Blitz session. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So first one, knowing what you know now, both personally and professionally, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and give her a piece of advice, what might that be?
Start therapy earlier.
I love it. Yes, a lot of deprogramming to be done. And then as you look ahead, I know you shared a little bit about what you believe your calling to be and the work that you're doing. 40, 50, 60, however many years from now, you're looking back at your life and you're sharing the story of who you were and what you did. What will that narrative be?
I always say I want to be able to say that I left it better than I found it, whatever that was, that, I pulled out of somebody something they couldn't see in themselves, that, I created a system that didn't exist before, that I created this roadmap that helped people chart further on their path. So really for me, it's just coming in and it's beyond the do no harm or leave no trace. I actually want to, plant seeds along that path.
I love that. And then I'm pretty sure if I asked about books, we could be here forever because you're a reader as well. I'm curious, you mentioned a couple books today that I will definitely link in the notes as well. But are there any other books or is there another book that has been pivotal for you in your growth and development?
It Didn't Start With You, which really digs into intergenerational trauma and helped me understand the things that I was carrying that I didn't even know had happened or weren't my own thing to carry. This idea of scarcity that we carry with us from our ancestors. My mother, while she was pregnant with me, her only brother, died in a plane accident. Mm. And that trauma, it didn't occur to me that was my trauma too. But it was impacting me in ways that I had no idea about. And until I read that book, it didn't click for me why I was behaving the way I was, or kind of having that foreboding joy feeling. So
yeah. Oh, that's powerful. Look, we could do just a whole nother episode on that. I mean, the audience has heard me talk about, that 0 to 7 and how our subconscious is developing and picking and registering everything. And whether we know it or not, we are just reliving those first 0 to 7 years until something happens where we can go back and heal or uncover, a new truth about that experience. So I might have to have you back for the next series when we talk about that.
Yes, and we need to do one on traditions too, because I'm ready to throw a bunch of them out. So
yes, absolutely. So with that, Kendra, if the audience, is looking to connect with you, they want to learn more about you, about the work that you do, where do you hang out? How can they touch base with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. My name is pretty rare. There is one other gal that has my first, middle, and last name, which is interesting. But you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. Look forward to connecting with some of your listeners.
Awesome. So be sure to connect with her on LinkedIn and on IG. Let Kendra know that you heard her on the podcast. With that, I will leave you. Have a wonderful rest of the week. We will be back next week with another amazing powerhouse. Thank you for your vulnerability and your time and your courage and sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing this space with me and having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Have a great rest of the day, and we will talk next week. Take care. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you found today's conversation helpful or got a piece of insight that you plan to implement in your life, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Sabine Gideon and send me a message, or feel free to leave a review on either Apple or Spotify. I also invite you to share this episode with anyone in your network, another powerhouse possibly, who you think might benefit from today's conversation. Lastly, as always, any links, any resources, or any upcoming training is included in the show notes, so be sure to check that before you leave today. Until we chat again, have a blessed and powerful week.